Hey there, I'm Kat, and this is Brews and Reviews. In today's video, I'm going to talk to you guys about all the books that I read in July, but first let's talk about the elephant in the room. Where's my coffee? If you've been around for a while, you'll know that I usually have a coffee with me in every video. It's literally in my channel name, Brews and Reviews. So long story short, I've been getting migraines for a while and the doctor told me I'm not allowed to have caffeine anymore. And I said to them, oh, it's fine. I'll just have decaf coffee instead. No. Decaf coffee still has caffeine in it. I'm not allowed to drink coffee anymore. No, actually worse than that, I'm not allowed to drink coffee, tea, or hot chocolate. What other hot drinks are there? So I'm in a little bit of a bind while I test out whether I'm allowed to have caffeine or not for the foreseeable future. So there will be no coffee for a while, and I'm very sad about that. But it also means that potentially I might make fewer videos because I am just struggling with life right now. The caffeine withdrawal is quite a significant thing because I didn't just drink coffee. I had a lot of caffeine in my life, and being without is really not a fun time, but you know, health comes first. But actually I want to throw it out to you guys. If you guys know of any coffee substitutes that I could drink that don't have any caffeine in at all, so I can't have decaf as much as I want it, I can't have it. If you've got any suggestions, please let me know. I'm not a big fan of fruit teas, but I am willing to try some stuff. I really want a coffee substitute. It tastes like coffee. I just like the taste of coffee and I just can't have it. And it's a frustrating time for me. Anyway, enough about that. If you guys do have any ideas, please leave them in a comment below because I would sincerely appreciate that. I'm going to be trying out basically anything that I can find just to like fill that gap, because at the moment I'm just really sad. But let's get into this. Everything I read in July! So let's start off with Vengeful by V. Schwab. I finally picked this up. I've been saying that I'm going to pick up for bloomin' ages, and I haven't, but I have now, and I liked it. I did find myself a little bit confused about the timelines. Now this might have been because I was listening to the audiobook, and it did just keep switching from like 5 days ago to 2 years ago and like yesterday, and then I kept flicking back and forth and I just could not get my head around it. And I wonder if that's partly because I just don't have the mental capacity at the moment to like process things like that. I've just been having too many headaches and migraines and things, and I just kind of can't keep track as well as I used to be able to. So I found this one kind of confusing. Probably would have been easier if I was like reading it with my eyes, but I can't do that either right now, so I did really like the new characters of Marcella and June, and I liked the story overall. I think it was kind of fun and different. I wasn't really sure where I was expecting this story to go after the first book ended, but I liked the progression of it and where different characters go. I don't want to spoil anything because obviously this is the second book in a series, but I like that we got to see different types of these extraordinary humans. I ended up giving this one 4 out of 5 stars. Next up I was doing a buddy read with Emily from Novelle Novels, and I read Percy Jackson and the House of Hades. This is the 4th book in the Heroes of Olympus series. Obviously I won't say too much about this one because it is the 4th in the series, but I really enjoyed this book specifically because I felt like a lot of the heroes got to stand on their own and sort of prove their worth, and I feel like that is something that was really needed in this series. It started to happen toward the end of the 3rd book, but like everybody sort of got to stand up and prove that they are the people who need to be on this quest, and I really like that. I also really like Leo's little side tangent in this story, and Percy and Annabeth are obviously off on their dangerous quest. Oh, it's so hard not to spoil anything. But I really enjoyed it, and this is one of my favourite books in the series. I remember this one the most out of the entire Heroes of Olympus series. I don't remember the 5th one at all, so I'm really interested to see how that one goes when I reread it, but I love this one, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Then next up I read The Physics of Climate Change by Lawrence M. Krauss. And I did enjoy this book, and I felt like I did learn some things. I just feel like it doesn't really translate very well into the audiobook format, which is how I read it. There were a lot of figures and graphs and things, and I couldn't see those. It just kept referencing them, and it was like, see figure 1, and I was like, I can't. Ears, eyes, don't translate. This is not accessibility friendly, come on. So I didn't enjoy that part of it. It was a really interesting book. I did learn stuff, and it was a bit depressing because climate change in general is pretty depressing. Yeah. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I am sure this would have been better had I read it physically, but I didn't, and I didn't realise that there were going to be so many figures and graphs that I just couldn't see. So, that's annoying. Next up I picked up Seems Like Murder by Dorothy Howell. So honestly I picked it up because of the pun in the title and the fact that there was a cat on the cover, because I'm a sucker for that sort of thing, and occasionally I like a cozy mystery. This one was very surface level, like it really wasn't very deep, much like this review of this book. It involved a woman who moved back to her aunt's hometown after she made some big mistakes at work and then sort of been suspended because she'd made these mistakes, and then she ends up helping her aunt out. Somebody gets murdered and she's like, oh well, I will try and look at that, and she ends up sort of romancing the sheriff of the town, and she gets involved in these town activities, including making a sewing night, and it's kind of fun. The thing that annoyed me the most though was that this main character had got herself into this position because she had fucked up. She had made a major mistake on this client deal and they'd suspended her for it, and okay, cool. But then she had a friend still in the office that was like, oh, now everyone's blaming your toxic boss and saying that blah blah blah, this was the boss's fault and all that. And I'm just like, nowhere in this woman's story did it say that she had a toxic boss. It said she made a mistake and it was her fault, and then for some reason it's the boss's fault. And I'm like, I don't think that that's how business works. That was random and annoying. And there wasn't enough of the cat. Should have been more of the giant ginger cat. That would have been better. Anyway, it was fun and I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. Then next up I picked up We Are Legion, We Are Bob by Dennis E. Taylor. This is a book about a man who gets really rich all of a sudden. He sells his company and he decides that he's going to sign up to one of those cryogenics things where they freeze your head. And then later on in time, when they have figured out how to basically make people eternal, they'll bring him back and, unfreeze him. Now, doesn't quite go to plan, because pretty much as soon as he has signed his document to say, yes, I'm into this, as soon as I die you can do that, he gets hit by a car and dies. And then he wakes up 150 years later and everything has changed. The government has been sort of overthrown and he's technically no longer considered alive, so he's involved in some experiments to make him an AI, which is really interesting, and I have more detailed thoughts about this in a vlog that I did, which I'll link in the description below if you want to see more detailed thoughts. But there's a lot of discussion about when somebody's consciousness is cloned, how much of that person is the original person, and I think that's really interesting because even the person that wakes up is not necessarily the same as the person who died. And Bob gets cloned a lot in this book. There's a lot of Bobs, and it's just really fun. I really enjoyed it. I really like this kind of sci-fi story, so I ended up giving it 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I'm definitely going to be reading the next one. Then next up I picked up The Return of the King by J.R.R. Tolkien. This is to complete my Lord of the Rings reread, and I loved it. It's such a good book. It's so good. It's basically perfection, and I would just keep reading The Lord of the Rings over and over again because I love it so much. Obviously I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. I loved it. What more is there to say? Next up I read Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood. If you want to know my thoughts about this book, I have a review of it and I'll link it in the description below. This is an erotic romance book about two people, Rue and Eli, who plan to hook up, but their hookup doesn't go right. So Rue decides that they're never going to see each other again, and that's that. Even though both of them kind of wish that they had the opportunity to hook up, they both okay, c'est la vie, that's annoying. Anyway, Rue goes into work the next day, and whose company is hostile takeovering her company? It's Eli's! But seriously, this is really fun, and I think this is a very different book for Ali Hazelwood. It's still a woman in STEM book. I think the two characters are much more confident, and they have past trauma that they're both dealing with. They're both very confident in the sexual side of their relationship, but they're not so great at communicating and talking about feelings. So it's really nice to see them grow in that capacity. But yeah, I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. Really enjoyed it. Would definitely recommend. Okay, next up we have Maybe This Time by Cara Basto, and this is an audio play that's available on Audible. I ended up picking this one up because Abby from Abby Lucy the Book Lover picked it up, and she was like, I want to talk to you about this, so read this book. So I did. And it's about a woman who gets stuck in a wormhole and gets shifted 80 years into the future. And she happens to get through to a phone call to a guy that she knows back right before she went through the wormhole. So future her is trying to talk to this guy in the past to try and stop past her from going into the wormhole in the first place, because that's a very bad thing. She's very lonely, very sad in the future. She's been there for 5 years and it's just not a good time. But this is a very fun sort of audio play. It's one of those ones that has sound effects and a full cast. It's really obvious what's gonna happen. It's not smart, but it's easy for your brain, and it's really fun. Just don't think too hard about the wormhole plot. It really falls apart a bit if you start thinking at all, so don't if you read this book, but it is fun, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And then the last book I read in July was something actually completely different for me. Like, I never usually read this sort of thing. But basically, I'd heard Olivia Savannah from Olivia's Catastrophe talk about this book, and I kept thinking about it, which is really unusual for me. So the book that I picked up was The Perseverance by Raymond Antrobus. Now, this is a book of poetry, and I don't read poetry because I've said many times on this channel, I don't really understand poetry, and I don't know if that's because I am autistic and I just find it really hard to sort of interpret exactly what people are trying to say, and I just tend to stay away from poetry because it just doesn't really work for me in most cases. Now, the way Olivia had described this book actually just made me really interested in it, and I was like, I'm gonna give it a go. We'll see. I haven't read poetry for a while, and I actually really enjoyed it. Now, I will say I didn't get some things. There were definitely some poems there that I just did not understand or like really gel with, but there were some that I really enjoyed. I think one of the things that really drew me into this was that Raymond Antrobus is deaf, and a lot of these poems center around deafness and conversations around deafness. There's also a lot of poems around grief and race, and they were really interesting. I didn't get all of it, but what I did get I found really impactful, and I feel like if you understand poetry, then you'll probably really like this. It's one of those books that make me wish that I got poetry more, because I feel like there's much more that I could get from this if I did. I don't know, I definitely enjoyed some poems more than others. I rated it 3.5 out of 5 stars, but I feel like if you like poetry, then maybe pick this one up, because I think you'll get more out of it than I did. And I still feel like I got something out of it, which is really good for me, because me and poetry, we just don't really get along. But I'm glad I tried it. So yeah, those are all of the books that I read in July. It's not as many as I may typically read, but you can only read what you can read when health is not on your side. And if you like this video, please leave a like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!